Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's live stream. It is November 19th, 2025, and I'm excited to get to do the show. Last week, we had really great feedback from a lot of folks who were able to watch, and they enjoyed the clips, they enjoyed the interviews, and they enjoyed the different pieces that we did. And so I'm excited to get back into it tonight. Owen is not here tonight. He had a work obligation, but hopefully he'll be back next week. So it's just going to be me. That may make me a little slower in the chat and some of those things like that. But I am trying to make it work, running things by myself tonight. And I'm excited to get started with it. So let me give you the frame for what we're going to be talking about tonight. And what we will have on the show for you tonight. And then we'll get into it because there's a lot to cover. So we are starting with economic austerity budgets that are coming up in Maryland and shady deals with billionaire tech companies being made by the government. And then we're going to explore how grassroots democracy and people-powered organizing can break through Maryland's political status quo. Our guest is going to be Hiruy Hadgu from Howard County for Human Dignity, and he's going to talk about some great work that they're doing there in Howard County to try to change the county charter in a way that makes it more just, more democratic, more peaceful, and more ecological. So you can drop questions in the chat at any time. You can donate in order to help us reach our public financing goal. We had another good week this week, so gogreen2026.com, donate for that. You can sign our petition to get on the debate stage, the MPT debate stage at gogreen2026.com debate. And yeah, I guess with that, I'm going to get started and go to our first segment tonight, which I am calling More Austerity. And we are going to talk about some of the upcoming budget cuts. So last year's General Assembly session was all about the budget. There was a $3 billion budget shortfall at the beginning of the session, and it was really contentious. It was really difficult. It was a really difficult session, and it was because of the budget. At the end of it, they thought they had avoided a problem. They had thought they had avoided a budget problem for the coming year's General Assembly and thought they were going to have one for 2027. However, this week, something really interesting happened, or this last week, something really interesting happened that I think is going to be a huge thing for us to watch as we go forward with this campaign. So last week, news broke that the budget deficit is much larger than expected going into next year. It is $1.4 billion, almost $1.5 billion of a budget deficit. And that is 5 times higher than when the General Assembly left in April. When the General Assembly left in April, they thought it was going to be about $300 million, but it is now $1.5 billion. And so one of the interesting things about this is that Wes Moore's team has already said that they have no intention to raise taxes any further this year. After all, it's an election year, and politicians don't like to raise taxes in election year. So it's important to know that we have a $1.5 billion deficit, and the governor doesn't want to raise taxes. Additionally, we have a state rainy day fund, but lawmakers have been cautioned on using that because it would hurt our bond rating and it would hurt our ability to do that, or to make those payments. So I think we're in this situation where we're going to have to make up about $1.5 billion in the budget. And we don't have the ability to raise taxes. We don't have the ability to raise additional fees because the Maryland Democrats don't have the political will to do that, even if it's necessary. And so the headlines say that this is a fiscal crisis, but I want you to see something else. I think this is a deliberate political strategy. Wes Moore campaigned on progressive promises and then he delayed the revenue until he could create a crisis. And then he used that crisis to justify austerity budgeting. I think this is a pattern you need to watch for in Maryland and in this election year, but I think you should watch for it everywhere. I think Democratic governors are triangulating between their base and their billionaire donors. So let me show you a little bit about how this works. When Wes Moore ran in 2022, he ran on a whole set of bold promises that his base loved. He was going to expand pre-K, he was going to raise minimum wages, he was going to hire more government workers, he was going to do a whole bunch of things that he said were going to make Maryland a more progressive state. And he said he could do this by passing more progressive taxations on Maryland's wealthiest residents. Well, in 2023, when he had a mandate, because he had just won the election by about 30 points, he could have moved to a wealth tax at that point, but he didn't do it in 2023. In 2024, he also didn't increase taxes on the wealthiest Marylanders. And in fact, he waited until 2025 when there was a $3 billion fiscal crisis in order to propose more taxation. Now, by that point, his now, he did offer a 2025 budget that included increased taxes on Marylanders making over 500K a year. But it also included $1.2 billion in cuts last year and $7 billion in cuts over 5 years. Oh, yeah. Wait, let me say one other thing. In addition to the funding crisis that we have, we also found out last week that the Key Bridge, which was taken down in 2024 by a cargo ship, is going to cost $5.2 billion to rebuild, and it had previously come in at $2 billion. So you see a lot of things are coming together here in this story in order to make it a really bad fiscal year coming up in the next year. Increased deficit, 5 times bigger than we thought it would be. The governor is not willing to use taxes in order to close that deficit, and the rainy day fund is not accessible according to the budget office. Those are some big pressures. And one of the major infrastructure projects that the state has to fund is now doubled in price, $5.2 billion, in order to rebuild a bridge that is essential to the Baltimore area transit network. So, what does that mean? Last year, it meant that Westmore proposed a whole bunch of cuts. He proposed $1.2 billion cuts in 2025 and $7 billion in cuts over the 5 years. He targeted things like public schools, disability services, childcare, and higher ed funding. This is a really good analysis from last year at this time when the Maryland Center on Economic Policy looked at his budget and looked at the austerity budgeting that he was proposing. And it's worth noting that they make the point that the refusal to implement a better budget or to implement revenue generation, more taxes on wealthy people, early in his administration, left them in a place with forced austerity. So now, mostly last year, the General Assembly worked that out. Some of those cuts didn't come, and that was because there was $1.6 billion in new taxes and fees last year. The hope was that we wouldn't have another budget crisis this year, and that we would be able to have this year be a relatively smooth sailing year. But that's not what happened. And so here are some key facts looking at what's going on with this story right now. So far this year, 500 plus state of Maryland jobs have been eliminated through Governor Moore's government modernization efforts. He started off saying that he wasn't going to touch jobs and that he was just going to get savings via property holdings and fleet management and IT modernization. And then he moved to hiring freezes, and then he moved to buyouts. 500 plus Maryland workers have lost their jobs this year as a result of that. Now, $1.4 billion is the structural deficit that we're facing as we go into fiscal year 2027, and that will need to be addressed in the 2026 legislative session, which starts in January. That is a 500% increase in the projected budget deficit since April of last year. So we're looking at a situation where a lot of those austerity cuts from last year are coming back. And I think that's a thing that we need to watch out for as we're going into this year. The austerity cuts that Moore tried to make last year to childcare, to public schools, to disability services, to transit, to higher ed, many of those are likely to come back. He's also likely to fire or lay off more or buy out more Maryland workers. I think the tighter budget without the ability to without raising taxes or without dipping into the rainy day fund just means that the budget that he offers this year is going to be an austerity budget that has a lot of cuts. I think the other thing to look out for is that this is the year of the blueprint checkpoint. And let me explain what I mean by that. In 2021, Maryland passed All right, in the beginning of this decade, Maryland passed the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which was a decade-long investment in public education, and it was billions of dollars invested over a decade in order to make sure that Maryland had the best schools in the country. We began with that process. We began doing it, and last year Moore tried to make cuts to it, but the legislature really pushed back pretty hard, and the teachers' unions pushed back pretty hard. There were some cuts, but for the most part, it stayed intact. This year, because it's the fifth year of the program, it is mandated that there has to be that there has to be an audit and a report about how the first 5 years of the program went. And what we should expect to have happen out of that report is that he is going to use it in order to say that he has to make massive cuts to the investment in public education that Maryland has tried to make. He's going to say that we have to cut the blueprint funding and we have to cut public school funding in order to save public school funding. He's going to use the budget crisis and the audit as a means of doing that. And I would suggest he always intended to do that because the amount of money that was allocated in it would have required significant tax increases much earlier in his administration, and his unwillingness to make those commitments to higher taxes earlier in his administration likely means that he simply is not going to have, or that he simply always planned to do this. Here's what I think the pattern is. Campaign progressive. Talk about everything your base wants and offer it to them on the campaign trail. And then when you get elected, delay raising revenue, which is taxes on wealthy people, for political reasons. In 2023 and 2024, Wes Moore did not want to raise taxes on the wealthy people because he was worried that it would help Larry Hogan, who was the former governor of Maryland, win a United States Senate seat or a United States Senate race. So he finally did it in 2025, but that was after he had already created a fiscal crisis and blamed it on the Republicans. So I think that so far the pattern goes campaign progressive, delay taxing the wealthy, create a fiscal crisis and blame it on the Republicans. The next step is to propose austerity as common sense pragmatism. Propose cuts to disabilities, propose cuts to students, propose cuts to people who need government services, and do it as frame it as pragmatism. And I think the next step with that is when you're running for re-election, triangulate with your base by making some concessions. Give some of the cuts that you had wanted to take back to disabled people. Give some of the cuts that you had wanted to take back to the teachers' unions, but let them know that you had to make a favor for them in order to get those cuts, and then implement austerity politics and blame the Republicans. Watch out for this. I think this is going to be what defines much of the rest of the next year here in Maryland, is this type of austerity politics coming from a neoliberal Democrat like Wes Moore. Watch for it in your state too. I imagine if you have a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature, you are also going to see this pattern. You're going to see progressive campaign promises, no new taxes on the wealthy, fiscal crises, austerity, and blaming Republicans. Now, our alternative to this, and we'll get into this on a different episode in more depth, but our alternative to this is more progressive taxation. Tax the wealthiest people, not just people making $500,000, not just a half point higher, more progressive taxation in order to pay for the things that we need to pay for. Close corporate tax loopholes in order to get more money coming in that is otherwise being taken away by out-of-state corporations. Stop the tax breaks for billionaires and corporations as we try to lure them to move here for a couple of years. Establish a public bank so infrastructure like the Key Bridge is easier for us to build and stronger for us to, and we can invest in it without having to pay fees and fines to Wall Street banks. Public ownership of a lot of things like utility companies and cooperative businesses that allow Marylanders to be at the core of our economy. We think you need to watch out for this austerity, but we think the solution to it is a solidarity economy. We'll get into a whole lot more in another episode about what the solidarity economy is. But, this is an interesting story to me, and I want folks to keep an eye on it. So that is our first interesting news for the night. Let me see if there's anything in the chat that sounds interesting. Anybody have questions before we go on to the next one? Anything to say about this? Okay. All right. Let me take a sip of coffee here and get ready to do the next one. it really is nice to have my cohort or my partner on this, because a lot of talking for me so far. But I want to go on to the next interesting story for the week, and um, this is one that we are calling Claude Gets a Government Job. All right. So last week, Maryland announced a partnership with Anthropic to bring AI into state government. And they say that Claude will help process 150,000 documents monthly for benefits applications, speed up permitting, and handle environmental assessments. The headlines say innovation, but I want you to see something else. I want you to see subsidized labor funded by billionaires to capture market control. This is a pattern you need to watch for, not just in Maryland, but everywhere. Let me show you how it works. First, understand this. AI is labor. When Claude processes those 150,000 documents, it's doing work, the same work that Maryland caseworkers are currently doing. Claude is a worker, and right now, AI labor appears cheap. That's the pitch. Process more, faster, for less money. But AI is only cheap because billionaires are subsidizing it. Anthropic burns through billions of dollars every year. They're not profitable. They raise billions more from venture capital and private equity. They're selling AI labor below cost. Why? The platform monopoly game is pretty clear, and the venture capital and private equity business. Underprice your service, or raise massive amounts of money, underprice your service, sell it below cost, displace human workers, displace unions, become essential infrastructure, and raise prices. Once the humans are gone, the unions are gone, and you're indispensable. This is what Uber is doing. This is what Amazon is doing. This is what DoorDash and all the other food delivery folks are doing. Lose money for years, subsidized by your investors, eliminate the competition, then capture the market. Right now, Maryland is getting a deal on AI labor that is artificially cheap. Now, let's look at who is implementing this in Maryland. Anthropic provides the AI. Claude is going to be in government. Anthropic is funded by a venture capital firm called General Catalyst. A new company called Percepta is doing the implementation. They are 100% owned by General Catalyst. Starting to see a connection here? Now, the Rockefeller Foundation, a nonprofit foundation, is providing the legitimacy to the deal and working with Percepta and Anthropic and General Catalyst in order to put a veneer on this of legitimacy. Now, who is Percepta? Well, their CEO is a former Palantir SVP. You know, and Palantir is famous for controversial government surveillance contracts, for building a system that works with ICE, for doing all of these really bad things. And here's what's interesting about this. Here's the timeline of when this happened. In October of 2025, General Catalyst publicly unveiled that this company, Percepta, who is going to be implementing Claude here in Maryland, they formed Percepta as a new company in 2025. October of 2025. And then in November of 2025, Maryland announced a partnership with Percepta just 1 month after they had formed. Now, it's interesting. A company launched in October gets a major state government contract in November. That's not a competitive bid process. That's more like a prearranged deal. Now, General Catalyst just raised $8 billion. They bought a hospital in Ohio. They're buying up everything they can. They call themselves a transformation company. If we follow the dollar, we see what's getting transformed. That's Maryland taxpayer money. Maryland pays for Claude licenses. Anthropic and General Catalyst makes money. Maryland pays Percepta engineers. Percepta and General Catalyst make money. They're making money on both sides of this. And where do people like this meet? Well, here's a really interesting connection. Every July, there's a conference in Sun Valley, Idaho, Billionaire Summer Camp. Tech CEOs, venture capitalists, politicians, media moguls. Governor Wes Moore has attended this Sun Valley conference multiple times, 2023, 2024, 2025. It's really interesting that he's going to these. Now, 5 months after his July 2025 visit, he announces this partnership with companies in the General Catalyst portfolio, supported by foundations whose leaders sit on boards with other Sun Valley attendees. Now, the question here is, who doesn't get invited to billionaire summer camp? The Maryland caseworker is processing those 150,000 documents right now. They don't get invited. Public employee union leaders don't get invited. The workers whose jobs are being automated, they don't get invited. The people who get displaced don't get a seat at the table while the deals are being made. This isn't a conspiracy. This is just how elite networks work. And so let's talk a little bit about how Maryland's AI policy is structured. Here's where it gets interesting. Maryland does have a pretty comprehensive AI policy. They passed it in 2018 or in 2024. A Senate bill mandated impact assessments for AI on rights, safety, environment, some other things. Now, what is not in there is job displacement. The law requires that the AI subcabinet make recommendations about job displacement, but it doesn't say anything about putting actual guardrails in place that would stop the kind of job displacement that's going to happen to those caseworkers who are processing the stuff that Claude's going to take from them. So here's another problem I want to talk about with this is, let's talk about some numbers here first. So again, I borrowed this number from the previous one. 500 state of Maryland jobs have already been eliminated this year through Wes Moore's government modernization efforts. And this integration of Claude into the government is another part of that. It is simply a part of the same modernization efforts that have been going on so far. And here's another one. According to an MIT study, $30 billion has been invested in corporate enterprise transformation, like the one they're trying to do with Claude in Maryland, yielding a 95% failure rate so far. So it's not even as if we're guaranteed to have this work. The record shows that this kind of investment actually doesn't work in order to produce better results for corporations or for governments. And here's another number. 10 to 20% unemployment is what is predicted by Anthropic CEO Dario Amedeo. Within 1 to 5 years of people using his product. So I think we have this really interesting thing happening here where we have a company that didn't exist a couple of years ago teaming up with a tech billionaire and an elite foundation in order to come and promise to basically replace government jobs for workers in Maryland. But here's almost the most revealing part. We can't actually see what the contracts are for this deal. When Maryland announces a landmark partnership like this, you'd expect to see contracts. You'd expect to see an amount of money that Maryland is paying for it. You might even expect to be able to go to the state procurement database and understand exactly how the deal worked. That's how it's supposed to work, at least, but that's not how it worked in this case. So let's look at this timeline again. In July of 2025, according to the press release that was announced about this, Percepta engineers began working with Maryland Department of Environment. October 25, Percepta announces itself as a public company. November 13th of 2025, Governor Moore announces a landmark AI partnership with Percepta, a company that's been working with the state of Maryland with no contracts and doesn't seem to have existed until before that. So wait, let's back up for a second here. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're not finding the contracts. Maybe there's something we're missing. But we had several people looking at this and we could not find Percepta in the state contracts, in the state contracting database. It's not there. Maybe it is. Maybe I searched wrong or something. If you find it, let us know. But shouldn't there be a contract in the procurement database that says how much we're paying these folks, or if somebody else is paying them? So a couple things to look for here. The first one is is subsidized labor, right? AI is priced below cost, subsidized by the kind of billionaires that Wes Moore hangs out with in Idaho each summer. And then once humans are displaced, they're going to increase prices and make folks like Maryland dependent on them. The next thing is the way that the networks work. The governor is at a billionaire conference with tech CEOs and venture capitalists. Those same venture capitalists own the implementation company and invest heavily in the AI company, and workers are excluded from the decision-making room. Who was in the room? That's a good question, but we don't know because the billionaire summer camp doesn't really publish like what the meeting schedule was or what was decided there. Another thing I think we want to point out here is that while the law requires impact assessment on privacy, security, bias, things like that. It doesn't require any of that when it comes to the workforce. We must have AI rules that protect the workforce, protect the displaced workers, and make sure that we're not getting rid of all the people who are processing those documents right now. So I think that this is a really good story to keep an eye on. We need to figure out what happened with the contracts. We need to see the way that this is going to get implemented. And I think that the Rockefeller Foundation and Anthropic and Governor Moore want this to be a model for your state too. So I think it's really important that we keep an eye on this, that we make sure we see what's happening, and that we demand policy at the government level that is going to ensure that if AI gets used, it is used not to displace workers, but to supplement what they do. Now, let me say here, I am not at all anti-AI. I'm not even anti-Claude. I work with Claude on a regular basis for campaign stuff, for job stuff, for things like that. It's my favorite of the models in a lot of ways, and it is friendly. Its friendliness should not gloss over the fact, though, that it is trying to take work and it is trying to take jobs. And in this case, it looks like it's probably going to start with taking the work of some caseworkers in the state of Maryland who help process benefits. So keep an eye on this. I think this story is going to grow and emerge over time. And yeah, whew. It's a lot without having Owen here. I hope he will be back next week, but let me pop over here and check the comments. So I will, there's three questions in here that I think I can touch on a little bit, and I'll get back to some of them later on. But the first one is how to get the word out about the public regarding the Green Party. We do podcasts like this. We show up in every part of the state, and we just need folks to spread the word and let their neighbors know, let their friends know, let their unions know. We are working with some unions, like we mentioned last week, the Maryland State Educational Association wouldn't even allow us to participate in the Maryland State Educational Association wouldn't even allow us to participate in their endorsement process. But we are seeking other unions who we can collaborate with to the degree possible. And then I think the last one here is, I don't know what the Democrat Socialist Party is. Do you mean the DSA? Well, I mean, the same way, like our Tara Bird asks how we're going to get the message out on price controls. We're only, any policy that we have, we're only getting the message out by going and talking to people. This podcast is fun. It makes a good way to share some ideas and things like that. But we are planning trips to Western Maryland, Southern Maryland, the Eastern Shore, Baltimore, Montgomery County, and all over the state in the coming months in order to try to make sure we can get out and talk to people, because we think talking to people in those one-on-one and face-to-face environments is the best way to go. So we are waiting on our guest. We should have a guest here in just a second. Hiruy Hadgu from Howard County for Human Dignity should be joining us to talk about some of the work that he is doing. If you got other questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll try to catch them. As soon as I can. And like I said, give me some patience here. I'm trying to do this by myself. It's easier with two people. It's easier with a producer, and I think we should have some of that back next week. So yeah, and while we wait for Hiruy, you can always put questions. You can always send your questions to questionsgogreen2026.com. It's a good way for, we will try to answer some of those questions on the air and things like that. So, just let us know if you do have questions, and we will definitely try to get them answered either as they come up or as we, we'll do them at the end in the Q&A section. So, Hiruy should be here in just a second. Any other questions while we're waiting for him? Okay. See, like if Owen was here, Oh, I see the green goat. If Owen was here, we'd be able to banter about other stuff that is happening. I will say, in the last 2 weeks, I've participated in two really interesting panels, and I'll try to make sure that we get those available to people as soon as possible. One last night was about open primaries, and then last week there was one that was about um, what it looks like to get actively involved in politics after the 2025 election. So with that, it looks like Hiruy is here, and I'm going to bring him on the stage. We can do a little bit of introduction, and then we're going to start getting to the questions. Hey, Hiruy, how are you doing?
Hey, Andy.
Good. So let me read your bio here a little bit, introduce folks to you, and then we'll get to talking about the work you're doing. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. So Hiruy Hadgu is an Eritrean American immigrant activist and community organizer with a long record of bold advocacy and service in Howard County, Maryland. For nearly a decade, he's helped lead efforts for equity and justice by pushing to hold real estate developers accountable, demanding they pay their fair share, and calling for an end to corporate welfare and zoning and land use decisions. He's been deeply involved in immigrant rights and Palestine solidarity work, including helping establish Howard County for a Free Palestine. Hiruy currently leads a ballot initiative to amend the Howard County Charter to implement an ethical investment policy that divests from exploitation and war and invests in the life-sustaining business practices. His community work is grounded in a strong academic training. He has a master's in nuclear engineering and radiological science and an MBA. Welcome to the show, Hiruy.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. So let's get started with talking about the work that you're doing. Can you tell us about Howard County for Human Dignity and the work on an ethical investment charter amendment?
Okay. Yeah. So thanks again, Andy, for having me, and just want to use this opportunity to say, congratulations on, launching your campaign, and wishing you success, over the next few months, as you talk to voters. And so yeah, thanks for having me on this platform. And so the Howard County for Human Dignity, as you mentioned, and during the in the bio, is to the purpose is to amend the county charter, the Howard County's constitution, and what it would do would be to restrict taxpayer dollars from being invested in what I would consider the war economy, weapons, guns, fossil fuel, private prisons, detention centers, any entities that are engaged in facilitating illegal military occupation, human rights abuses, and those kinds of entities. And instead, what it would require is that to invest our taxpayer dollars on entities that profit from life-sustaining business practices, non-exploitative ways of making money, and strengthening labor, just addressing the needs of the working class.
Excellent. And how can you tell us a little bit about how the charter amendment process works and how you decided to use the charter amendment for this?
The idea for the charter amendment actually came from seeing what a group in Pittsburgh was doing. We've tried. Howard County is majority, supermajority Democrat in the county council. We have a Democrat in the county executive's office as well. However, we only have one council member who has spoken out against the genocide in Gaza, who's been vocal on those issues, and um, and and besides that, the other council members, at least two of the Democrats, are definitely beholden to the real estate developers and just generally the establishment, the Democratic Party, which
So
is
they're not
tied.
going to do it, right? They're
Yeah,
not going
they're
to pass some
yeah,
ethical investments.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, they're not going to do it. So the fact that uh, after seeing what they were doing in Pittsburgh, it gave us an idea to do something like that here, and so that's that was that we got the idea to do that, and looked through the process, looked at the county's charter in terms of what is needed, collecting signatures, and of course talking to you, got a lot of input from you based on the Green Party's experience in collecting signatures and getting on the ballot, gaining ballot access. Of course, that's statewide, but a lot of that is also applicable at the county level. So so we knew that we yeah.
Can you talk to us about how that works a little bit? How do you get this charter investment for ethical investment on the Howard County ballot?
The county charter says that you have to collect a minimum of 10,000 valid signatures from Howard County voters, in order for the issue to be for a charter amendment to be on the ballot. And so if you're successful in getting the 10,000 signatures, then if potentially if there's legal challenges like there's been in other ballot questions, you would need to overcome those legal challenges, and after you overcome those legal challenges, then it gets on the ballot, and then the voter gets a say. And so on election day, so next year in November, we would vote on it, and if it passes, then it would amend the county charter, and that amendment would be effective, I believe, 30 days from the day from the day that it passes, and so and depending on the amendment, there would need to be certain actions certain laws that would need to be passed by the county council to implement the requirements of the charter.
Gotcha.
Amendment.
So if you get 10,000 signatures, 10,000 valid signatures from Howard County residents, and it passes legal challenge, it goes on the November 2026 ballot next year. And then Howard County voters would have an opportunity to vote on a question that asks if their money should be invested ethically or stop investing their money unethically and start investing it ethically. And then if it passes, that becomes the new constitution of Howard County.
Yeah, it's very simple, really. No, it's and the key word there is valid signatures. As based on our interaction, Andy, you mentioned there's a decent number of invalidation rate based on how the signatures are provided by the voter. The state's manual also provides shows that there are a lot of pitfalls in terms of how the signatures are provided. So if you put your signature in the wrong line, then then it's invalidated, and if you don't put like a date of signature, it's invalidated.
So it seems like there's a lot of barriers to getting
There's
those
a lot of
10,000
barriers.
valid signatures.
Yeah. And so because of the invalidation rate, we would need to collect significantly more signatures to overcome that. And so our goal is to collect 20,000 signatures from Howard County voters. That represents roughly about 10% of the county registered voters. And yeah,
So
so
you said 10% of the county voters have to sign this petition?
well, so our goal would represent 10%,
So
but
that's a
it's
pretty
really
big goal.
5%. Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
lot. How are you feeling about it? How is it going so far?
I think I feel good. We've had a lot of enthusiastic volunteers who have come on board to go out and collect signatures. Our goal is to collect to get 200 volunteers to collect 100 signatures each. And so the 20,000 is a large number, but the 100 signatures per volunteer is an achievable number for that volunteer. And so we are slowly building and getting the number of volunteers. Many of these people have not gone out and collected signatures before, so we're including me. So I learned this is something that I started learning after starting this campaign, and so we're getting people who are otherwise not engaged in this kind of process to be engaged, and so it's pretty good.
And I think that's a really good segue to my next question. Like, this is really good on the logistics of it. I think people need to understand the logistical challenge in trying to get 10% of a county's population to sign on to something like this, even if it feels reasonable at first glance. That's a lot of people to talk to. And it's especially jarring to understand that it is 10% of the eligible voters. That is 1 in 10 people you see. You got to get to sign this thing. So that's pretty big. But let's zoom out a little bit and talk about grassroots power in Maryland. What have you learned about building grassroots power in Maryland and in Howard County through this campaign that we should talk about?
So I've been involved in county issues for nearly nearly 10 years, and to start with, the people who are most likely to be involved in community organizing are people with economic means and economic and political power. And so the people who actually and for these people, the system already works, and they just want things to change around the margins. And so I'll give you an example, and like I'll illustrate this by way of an example. So in Howard County, the groups that are involved in mostly this immigration action in Howard County, to advocate on behalf of undocumented immigrants. Again, many of them are majority are white, majority are people with economic means, and so when faced with a need to make some fundamental changes that would require them to go up against the power structure, they're not going to do that. And so they, first, because, I think, again, like, the system works for them. Second, they don't want to alienate the relationships that they've built with, the politicians. And so they want to address these issues under without alienating them. And so as a result of that, very little changes. And so there's that one, and so as a result of that, like, now, as we're seeing, ICE go out into communities and, terrorize them, you don't see, like, we see the bare minimum ask of ending 287G in Maryland, supermajority Democrat county, for the most part, many of the counties supermajority Democrat. The state is supermajority Democrat. Legislature, governor who's a Democrat. And so, as we're seeing the bare minimum, but we should be seeing more, like, requiring that these ICE agents should not be wearing face masks while they're out there, providing resources to undocumented immigrants, like, making sure that when they're faced with these confrontations, that they have support. Just like when federal workers were facing challenges, like pouring resources to help people in need. So I'm saying all of that because, again, like, the people who are doing this, who are pushing on this, are not doing that because, again, like, that's one barrier. And then the other barrier is, at least in Howard County, you have the nonprofits who are largely, again, like, tied with the power structure. And so a lot of the organizing is done by people who get paid to organize. And so, if you're if you're someone who is, like, doing this to just without getting paid, to get a paycheck, then like, again, like, you face the same issues of don't want to mess up relationships, don't want to mess up your paycheck. But the other thing is, you end up absorbing the energy of from people who want to contribute, but without getting paid. And so,
and those people really end up becoming a gatekeeper for people's energy as it is directed at advocacy, because somebody might say, I want to go to the county council and say this to this person. And that person who's paid by somebody who's connected to that person is going to say, oh, maybe not. Like,
yep. Yeah, exactly. And related to the nonprofits, you have a lot of the faith-based institutions. The same thing. There's a lot of there's decades and decades of entanglement with with the power structure, with the democratic power structure. And so my experience has been it's not the easiest to build and like a truly to organize for for radical demands, radical changes that would benefit, that would provide immediate material change, impact for people who need it under that environment. And so if you were and so you have to compromise a lot of your sort of principles and what you stand for, if in order to basically put yourself in one of the three categories that I mentioned. If you if you want to operate, and which is not something that I'm okay with. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. I mean, that explains why it's hard. and why you aren't choosing to do the traditional path. But I guess that leads to the question, like, you're doing this outside of that, you're trying to lead a people-powered movement to challenge that existing power structure and that existing two-party system. What role do you see for movements like this in that context? How do you see this type of movement changing that or challenging it?
So, until the until October 2023, even though I viewed the Democratic Party with a lot of skepticism, and disappointment, because of the fact that it exploits race, gender, or like other issues for corporate needs, uh, and to rile people up without actually providing for the people that need it. Um, I thought maybe there were some redeemable features that in the long run could be you know there could be some that could be salvaged, to put just to, if that makes sense. So, but I think after October 2023, I've just I don't I just I've lost that I've lost that hope. I don't think I'm in the camp where I feel like electoral politics will not will not get us out of these serious problems that we are facing, and it's largely because of the challenges in terms of like how the power structure maintains control based on the three groups of that I mentioned earlier. And so because of that, I think uh, uh, yeah, so I think electoral politics, there's a lot of challenges there that I don't think it's gonna get us out of the mess. But I think, and so because of that, I think I see these movements that we're working on, or like this organizing action that we're working on. Um, you know, uh, we can't completely disengage from from the electoral process, um, and at the same so we have to do something, because I do think if you disengage, then then you end up just seeding the way for um uh, whatever minimum impact that you have, that's not going to be there. So I think it's still worth it to be engaged in the electoral process and getting like new people involved in it. But the type of issues that we're talking about could help people be more could help people be more aware of okay, so there's we have uh capitalism is a problem, so like what are the alternatives, socialism, what's socialism like, talking about alternatives, talking about having not being okay with exploitative an exploitative economy, and have continuing to have these conversations, where it's not necessarily about the electoral process, but it's helping bring awareness to um, um, just our living conditions,
Yeah. And
if that
it's
makes
like
sense.
if the Democrats, Republicans, and whoever else is on the ballot isn't going to put divestment from unethical businesses on the ballot, you're going to, right? And you're going to make it so that an issue that people have to evaluate, that they care about, that they can vote on. And I think it's a way in a county where you're not going to get at some of these things, where your politicians are going to be safe, where your politicians are going to be more, in line with the developers and the big businesses, to put something like this in front of the people that the politicians don't get to control. That's the thing I like most about it, is you're not asking for permission in order for some council person to put this before voters. You're asking voters to put it on the ballot so that they can vote on it if they care about it, and not surrender to that apathy that comes from the politicians who want them to not care.
Yeah, and almost most voters that we talk to are, they're excited about this, and many of them, yeah, like they just, we explain it to them, and they're enthusiastic when they sign it. So and many also, you can see it on their face. They don't know what else to do, and they're like, yeah, like anything I can do to stop this madness. And the two parties uh, are not doing it. They're not helping.
I like the
It's
madness.
it's a death cult.
Yeah.
Like I call it. They're a death cult. Party. And I certainly hope that we've talked about like a multi-party system. Like I certainly hope that there's that. I think I'm hoping that the Green Party, that that you get access to the you get you qualify for the
For the
the
debates and things like that.
yeah.
But I think having people do work like this, progressive or radical causes, using this part of the Maryland Constitution in order to put issues that the politicians won't talk about on the ballot, is an important part that goes along with building a multi-party democracy. I mean, for me, it's always about like building a grassroots democracy and a multi-party democracy, because we can't put all of our eggs in one basket, right? Just like we shouldn't put all of our eggs in the Democratic Party basket, I don't think we should put all of our eggs in the Green Party basket. I think we should have people using the levers that are available to them, whether that is a petition to put an issue on the ballot, a third party in order to put a different kind of candidate on the ballot, or even a petition to put an independent candidate on the ballot if there isn't somebody from one of the parties willing to run. Like, I think one of the things that I appreciate about your work is that you refuse to allow the Democrats and Republicans to frame what is possible for you. And you say, like, if you all aren't going to take this issue seriously, we're just going to go directly to the people. And I think there's something really important about building the capacity to go around them, to ignore the electeds that we have right now, and instead to go directly to the people. I think there's a comment in the chat about it's hard to raise issues like this in these places, and it is. But I think what you're finding is that when you're going straight to the people are receptive, as long as you're not trying to have it be mediated by politicians, advocacy organizations, and faith institutions.
Yeah, I think people should realize that our institutions are failing. Like they've failed us. And I think right before this, I saw like this post on social media that the Howard County executive, Calvin Ball, he's introducing a bold plan to end homelessness by 2030.
Is
Or
it
like
AI? Is that what he's going to do?
right, like it's a 5-year plan. And and you look at that and you're like, okay, so this he's been in office by next year he would have been a county executive for for 8 years, and that would be his last year. And you know, less than a year before his term ends, he's introducing a bold action to end homelessness. You know, and
Yeah, I
so
mean,
like
it's interesting. Like before you came, I was doing a segment about how I did two segments. One was about how we're going to have massive austerity budgeting this year, and we need to look out for that, right? And I think it's fascinating that like in Calvin Ball's last year, he's finally addressing homelessness in a county that prides itself on taking care of everybody, on being civil, on a lot of those things. And it's like Wes Moore going into an election is going to tell us that he has to cut public education funding in order to save public education funding. And like these things, and he's also announced a deal with Claude to take, government jobs. He doesn't say that, but I say that.
it's insane.
Yeah.
It's and the people, and the thing is, like, the people, the majority, the electorate, like, that has the power, the economic and political power, still views them as, good, good politicians, good leaders with, with great vision, and that they're delivering. And but you look at the record, and it's um you have uh, the Howard County schools are, like, the especially the schools where, majority Black and brown children attend. They decline. They continue to decline. They're still building trailers in the schools, that are a danger, like, to public safety. In the event of, like, like a threat. Um, and just generally a threat to public health also. Teachers are still not getting, like, there's, the class sizes are still going up. They're still fighting about funding, like Oakland Mills High School, as one school that's still facing, like, continues to face significant maintenance issues. And you have all these things, and we and what you see is just like these pictures, like, of, like, these tours all over the county about how great things are. It's like major gaslighting. But the
Yes.
people that benefit from, the people with economic and political power, they're okay with that, because, again, like, their material condition is not impacted, and they're the ones who are controlling what happens. And
And,
so,
and they
as a
can say
barrier.
it's pretty good except for Trump. We were doing good except
Yeah,
for Trump.
exactly,
Right.
exactly,
And it's
exactly.
like you were doing fine, but a lot of people in Howard County were suffering. A lot of
Yeah,
people in Howard County are trying to figure out where the next paycheck is going to come from. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to pay rent. A lot of people are worried about the buildings their children are going to schools in. A lot of people are worried about what their job is going to be like when AI takes their job and the county has
right.
nothing to offer them. And meanwhile, you got a county that is making all these deals with these unethical companies in order to, I guess, help pave the way for those politicians to have more advances
Yeah,
in their career or something. But it is like,
yeah.
what are the people of Howard County getting from the unethical investments that Howard County has right now? And I think most people in Howard County who aren't one of those folks who's benefiting from the status quo would say not very much.
Well, like, uh, we've talked to voters, a few voters who've said, like, well, if we'd stop investing in weapons, aren't we, or like these, like like the bad companies, like, aren't we gonna make less money? And uh, the thing is, every time there's a recession or like a major economic fallout, we, the taxpayer, end up bailing these corporations after the fallout. So we have, like, right now, the tech bubble, or like the AI bubble. And like, the AI executives are already talking about, like, the government being the backstop to, for their failures. And so, like, you know actually, the reality is, like, we are investing our taxpayer dollars on these horrible companies, that are whose products are being used to kill children, or to exploit groups in the developing world, in the global south,
Or to
and,
surveil us.
to surveil us, or to make housing unaffordable for teachers, or to discriminate by healthcare access by from the protected class. Like, all these things are happening, and we're financing them. And then, if once they fail, they're still then they're still going to rely on our money to get them out of the mess. And our leaders are allowing that to happen.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
and it's interesting. One of the things that I have heard when I'm talking to folks about this work that you're doing, even folks from Howard County, is like, what are these so-called unethical businesses that are in Howard County? And it is like, go take a drive around Columbia Gateway, and you will see all the unethical businesses that are profiting off of their relationship with Howard County. I mean, it is a
yeah,
murderer's row of what you
yeah,
just described, and a whole bunch of county money went into building that park so that you could have your surveillors, your loan deniers, your healthcare companies, your weapons companies, your intelligence apparatus. They're sitting right there in the business park, right next to the universities whose endowments don't pay, or who hoard their endowments and don't pay taxes on their profitable stuff. Like, if you want to know the type of businesses that Howard County shouldn't be investing in, go take a drive around Columbia Gateway. And one of the fascinating things about it is, I don't know what it's like now. Maybe all those companies have forced everybody to go back to work. But the last time I was down there was nobody there, because all those companies had let folks start working from home. So you've got this big investment sitting right there on prime real estate, and all these buildings that are basically empty, and they're not going to ever get used for anything productive for the people of your county. They're going to sit there on the profit sheets of those
yeah,
businesses until they can get rid of them. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, to me, Howard County is a place where this is really important to do this, because so much of the businesses that are there fall into this profile.
yeah. And to your point, um, one of the biggest unethical investments in the county is real estate developers. And you have Howard Hughes Corporation that has taken hundreds of millions of dollars from taxpayer dollars through tax increment financing, or favorable land use and zoning entitlements, that last decades, uh, and allowances in terms of density allowances in exchange for quote unquote providing affordable housing. That So to date, only 52 have been provided by Howard Hughes Corporation out of the thousands that it has built. And so for like Columbia Gateway could be potentially a place where you could provide more housing.
Right.
You could provide like more schools. You could provide all these things. But unfortunately, what's going to happen is is a developer that's well connected, is going to get the ability to build in an unmitigated way that would ultimately have an adverse impact on the infrastructure, that will lead to the taxpayer paying more, and on the back end, by with taxes going up, to allow the developer to build and profit from the from the projects. And that's what's been happening. And so yeah, like you
And
have
then
the tech companies and the real estate developers that that profit.
and the private equity, the venture capital, the tech
Yeah.
companies, the real estate, and the universities that don't pay any taxes on their
Yep.
for-profit activities are benefiting. And you know who else is benefiting is the Democratic Party politicians, who are going to
Yep.
facilitate those deals and then use the donations they get from those folks in order to push themselves into the next level of office, where they can further enrich themselves and screw over the taxpayers.
Former county executive Ken Allman, he served for 8 years. After he left the county's this role. He ran for lieutenant governor. That didn't work out, and then he ended up working with University of Maryland to facilitate real estate deals that would benefit the developers there, while also working with Howard Hughes Corporation. I wrote about the some, it's called Beware the Ross Project. People want to take a look at that, a project that he started with Howard Hughes Corporation to take over the Columbia Association, to allow them to get to allow Howard Hughes to get certain easements, profitable land access. And so that's what's yeah, so to your point, this is what they do after they leave office. And then he served as the Maryland Democratic Party as the chair for a couple of years.
That's a cycle, right?
That's a cycle. Yeah.
Yep. And it's like, and I appreciate you all's work to end that, and I appreciate the opportunity that we've got to have to work with you over this course of time. I've been down there a couple of times for some of the trainings that you've done, and you and I have talked a lot about this, and I'm really excited not just to see this project grow, get on the ballot, and stop unethical investment in Howard County, and more importantly, create ethical investment in Howard County, but also for you to be able to spread this idea of using the ballot initiative as a means of doing progressive and radical policy that Democrat politicians would never do, because it goes against their profit motive and it cuts against the people who are paying their bills. What advice would you give to somebody else in a community outside of Howard County that wants to use the ballot petition in order to organize for change?
I think of course, definitely talk to you. You're definitely you're helpful in the initial discussions, and throughout the process as well. So I definitely I appreciate that, Andy. I honestly I think to if people not to allow the process to intimidate them is what I would say. And if it's something that I think okay, so definitely don't be intimidated by it. Just start the process, and talk to other to other people who have done it before. And of course, stay away from the political establishment, because the answer is always going to be no. And then the other thing is, even if the outcome is, let's say, impossible, meaning if let's say the goal is to get this thing done in 2 years. If that's not possible, it's still worth doing, because you end up building something that you can that you can use for other purposes. And so just as long as you start off with with acknowledging that this might not be possible, but we have we can do this, we can achieve these other things along the way. So don't the goal of getting it passed should not be the end all be all. There are other good things that would that could potentially come out of it. And so I think I would provide that advice.
That's great advice. And one of the things that I love most about the work that you all are doing there is a couple of you who have been organizing around Palestine and around other issues decided that you wanted to be able to figure out a mechanism to have this conversation with a larger number of voters. There was no ready-made politician who was going to run and champion these things. I mean, I'm trying to, but like there was nobody who was in Howard County who was going to do that in the way that you felt aligned with your morals and your values and your ethics. And so what I love is that you went and found a mechanism in order to have the organizing conversations you want to have with Howard County residents. And I sometimes think that people think Howard County is one of the hardest places to do this. And I think it is if you're focused on the people who have upper middle class jobs and the people who love the politicians they have right now. If you're using that pool of voters and the pool of folks as the ones that you want to have this conversation with, I think you're going to be in trouble. But what I love that you all are doing is that you figured out a mechanism for doing this that allowed you to have the organizing conversations with your neighbors that you need to have, to call out the flaws of the system, to offer an alternative, and to help people see a way that they can see themselves involved in a popular movement. So that's work that you all are doing there that I love, and I think more people should take it up. And yes, people can feel free to reach out to me to talk to me about how to do ballot petitions. I'm happy to walk through it and talk through the details with you. And I think really for you all, I provided some technical assistance that was helpful. But I think what excited me about the work that you were doing was you had a core group of people who believed they wanted to have this conversation with their neighbors and be able to organize around this issue. And you found a mechanism to do it, and you're doing it. And I think that I can't wait to be there when it gets on the ballot to celebrate with you. I can't wait to be there when it wins to celebrate with you, and to be able to say, yes, this is what people can do, even in a place like Howard County that is as connected as possible to these unethical businesses. The people who have the money and power in Howard County are deeply intertwined with the unethical businesses. And that's why I love so much that you all are going right at the gut of that, and talking to the folks who feel left behind, feel left out, and don't feel included in the way that Howard County does business in the past. No more, uh, no more of the same. Y'all are changing the game, and I really appreciate that. So how can people get involved with Howard County for Human Dignity? What can somebody who is in Howard County do to help? How can they engage? How can they plug in and find you?
So yeah, so as I see you have the website there, HoCoForHumanDignity.org. There's a volunteer link there that they can access and fill out the form, and we would get back to them. We have our Instagram. It's at HoCo for Human Dignity. The number 4 again. That they can reach us out there. And again, our goal is to get 200 volunteers to collect 100 signatures each. I think some people will collect more, some people will collect less. So even if you want to do like 10 signatures, 15 signatures, that's 2 or 3 forms. It's very easy. We train people on how to do it. And then there are other things, like related to just like the campaign operation that people want, if they wanted to get involved, we would be happy to plug them in. Please, reach out to us. And just also wanted to applaud you, Andy, for the vision that you have, with for the next year. And I think what you're doing requires patience, requires long-term thinking, and just the willingness to implement something based on that long-term thinking, and the patience to do that. I think is commendable. And what I like about you is your the pragmatism to be willing to work with it doesn't have to be a green, it could be anyone, as long as, you share, values in terms of achieving, common goal. And so I think, that's a good, that's a good trait. So I appreciate that. And yeah, looking forward to, uh, doing more good work together.
Yeah, no, me too. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you. It's nice to hear the praise sometimes and the thanks sometimes. Sometimes this is a thankless thing, but sometimes it's a very fulfilling thing, because look, we may not get there. You and I may never see this just, peaceful, democratic, and ecologically sound world that we want. But for generations, people have worked to build things that they don't get to see the full benefits of. That is how we struggle in this world. That is how we struggle against 500 years of racial, global racial empire. And I think you mentioned patience in it, and I think your approach demonstrates the patience as well, right? Like, there becomes this revolutionary patience, I think, once you realize that the system that we have is fundamentally broken and that we need to fix it in the long term, instead of going for the short fix of figuring out which Democrat in the primary is more likely to be the person who's going to fulfill our objectives. I think the ability to say, I'm going to go to one of the hardest counties in the country to build grassroots powers against unethical business practices and start putting the people on the ground, talking to their neighbors, collecting those petition signatures, shows that it's possible. Shows that it's possible even in Howard County, which is so entrenched in those businesses because of its connection to DC and because of its connection to military contractors and things like that. I think the work you're doing is inspiring. I'm excited to keep working with you on it. And after you win this one and we have the governor's race happen, I'm looking forward to the next thing we can do together, because I feel like there's an understanding. Once you have that clarity that this system is not going to save us, and that no small tweak in who is sitting in some council seat is going to make the difference, I think it becomes a lot easier to understand what our politics do need to be, how we do need to focus, how we need to build alternative forms of power that are based in people, not in politicians. And I love that you're doing that work, and I look forward to continue doing it with you. And I'd love to have you come back on as this thing goes forward. I'd also love to have you talk about something that isn't just this project. Like, it's a little bit in the weeds to get in here and talk about petition signatures and validations and those type of things. I appreciate you breaking it down for folks tonight. But I know that you're doing a lot of other work that is captured that is ensconced in this. So I'm excited to have you come back on and talk about it. And hopefully Owen will be here next time. Like I said, he had a work thing he had to do tonight. So Thank you for coming on and making me not feel so alone tonight. That first 30 minutes, it was rough. It was rough to do this thing without
the airtime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Hiruy, thank you so much. We will get this up on the YouTube. We'll make sure that people have the links up for it, and we'll spread the word whatever we can. And I look forward to coming down there sometime soon, collecting signatures with you and making sure we get this thing on the ballot so the voters of Howard County have a chance to vote for human dignity.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me on, and yeah, definitely look forward to coming on again.
Excellent. Thank you, Hiruy. Have a good night, and we'll talk with you soon.
Okay, you too.
All right, bye. Okay, so that interview was really great. I was really excited to get to talk to Hiruy. He and I have been collaborating on these things for a while, and I was excited to have him come and explain to you what he is doing there in Howard County with Howard County for Human Dignity. If you are interested in getting involved in a grassroots ballot access effort like he is doing, please reach out to me. It's a thing that I have some experience on, and I'm excited to help folks who are looking to bring radical policy and put it on the ballot in their county. So you can reach out at ideas at Go Green 2026 for that. And I just want to say to everybody, thank you so much for being here tonight. I think we'll hold off on doing the review of our grassroots democracy policy until Owen can be here next week. I really do want him to be, or I really want him to be here for that. It's important to have both of us talking to you about it. I think it's a useful way for us to communicate. Next week, I think we are going to have, I think our guest will be on talking about reparations in Maryland, talking about criminal justice in Maryland, talking about some other things. We're going to firm that up and get it confirmed, but once we have it, we will let you know, and we'll post it up here. Thank you all for listening tonight. You kept me company while I was by myself, and I appreciate it. And with that, I hope you all have a good night, and I will see you next week.